I agree.
Anything going on?
We
Not
get zoomed
yet.
in on right here. Very exciting.
Thank
I
you.
know. Fabulous today.
Oh, yours was too, that green. How come you didn't give me one with that green?
We got that, somebody had carrot out or something, a whole bunch of scars.
Oh,
And they was like,
that's
"Do you want
cute. I got some green
Oh,
shoes. Oh, girl.
Babe, I look out there.
I'm not camera ready. Okay, let's get started. So I appreciate everybody making time to think about how we might consider making some adjustments to how we consider rollerblading and skateboarding in the city of Chattanooga. I have put together some slides based on our conversation at the council meeting back in December, identifying some of the concerns that council members brought up. And I haven't gone so far as to change any language yet, but more to open up a more casual conversation than we can have on the dais to discuss where we want to head with this. So let's see, I'm going to push this button, this button, this button. Okay, I need help. I'm pushing the screen,
So just press the back button at the top
the
of it.
back button, okay.
And then press table.
Super, okay. All right,
That's
So-
different.
okay, so rollerblading ordinance, council work session. All right, so just to do a little bit of level setting, I mentioned how multimodal transportation is evolving, and I had my daughter take some photos out the window of our car over the course of Christmas break, just as I noticed some folks on the road, and then also had some photos sent to me of different ways that people are using our roads. I know that we've all talked about how we've seen people traversing our roads in wheelchairs. It's just striking to see the image of somebody moving across our roads in that way. I think that bike image where we have people that are, I mean, they're hauling their kids, you know, this is a real conversation. And then that one on the far left, that's one of these mono wheels that I mentioned to you all, you know, really isn't addressed in the code. And it's interesting because that is a board with a wheel. It is legally allowed to be there, but a four-wheeled skateboard is not, which is just an interesting.
Is that the wheel in the middle of the board?
Yeah, wheel in the middle. Yeah.
And you say it's allowed to be on the street.
So that's not really part of the definition of a skateboard within our code, and so even though that's downtown, that individual would be allowed to be downtown, but a person on a four-wheeled skateboard would not. So I took a look at what our pedestrian law is in Tennessee because the council had concerns about safety overall, and I remember that Councilman Ledford and Councilman Smith in particular talked about how, you know, what drivers and we don't want people to be hit by cars, etc. So I took a look at what the Tennessee Code Annotated says about pedestrian law. So drivers have responsibilities. I mentioned in less eloquent terms, you're not allowed to hit people, right, in a car. You just aren't. But you also are supposed to stay alert, yield at crossings, and exercise due care to avoid injuring people. So in all situations, drivers have to avoid colliding with a pedestrian on any roadway, operate at a safe speed, keep your vehicle under control, devote full time and attention to operating a vehicle, yield the right-of-way for pedestrians and marked crosswalks, yield right-of-way for pedestrians when emerging from alleys or driveways, and stop at all marked crosswalks for pedestrians. In school zones, yield at unmarked crosswalks for pedestrians in school zones. And drivers must absolutely not use handheld mobile devices or overtake or pass another vehicle stopped at a crosswalk. Pedestrians have the right to, this is pretty interesting, use any road in the state of Tennessee that is not access controlled like an interstate. Pedestrians have the right to cross the road at any location unless restricted by local ordinance or where there are adjacent signalized intersections. And pedestrians have the right to be yielded to in marked crosswalks, alleyways, and driveways. Pedestrians must use sidewalks when available unless they are obstructed. When practicable, use the left side of the roadway facing traffic when not on a sidewalk, so coming the opposite direction of traffic. And they must yield to vehicles on the roadway when crossing the road outside of a marked or unmarked crosswalk. So crosswalks, did a little bit of research on that. And we have marked and unmarked crosswalks, but something that was interesting that in some ways seems a little bit confusing, but that pedestrians are not required to use a crosswalk. Pedestrians in Tennessee are allowed to cross the road wherever they are, but that does not mean that a driver is allowed to hit them. They still have to yield to a pedestrian, okay? So as we level set that pedestrians have expectations of behavior for safety and drivers have expectations of behavior for safety, we can think about this rollerblading conversation. So I have two goals in bringing this ordinance change in front of council. The first is to decriminalize rollerblading and skateboarding. Right now, there's a section of our city where it is illegal to be on these devices, and that causes run-ins with the police that just really aren't necessary. Nor does it align with our our treatment of pedestrians on other types of modalities. And then the second is to establish safety and behavior expectations for people when they're traveling on skates or skateboards. So there's just two, hopefully pretty straightforward, simple things that I would like to achieve in bringing this to council. And so I'm hopeful that today I can get some detailed feedback to be able to adjust the language within what I've brought before council to get to a place where we feel confident we've made good decisions. So with goal number 1, to decriminalize rollerblading and skateboarding, this is our current language. It's in chapter 25, section 2528, and it prohibits skateboards and aggressive skates on downtown streets and sidewalks, period. It says, and I've highlighted this in yellow, it's unlawful for any person or persons to skate on skateboards or aggressive skates on public streets and sidewalks in the downtown area. And then it has this lengthy definition of what that downtown area is, and it does extend across the river into the North Shore and goes as far as Macaulay. Yes, ma'am.
So what's aggressive skates?
So aggressive
what does that
skates are a type of skate that have like an opening kind of in the wheelbase that would allow trick skating.
Oh.
But in the instance where this has come up, people will commute sometimes on that same pair of skates to go from one part of town to the skate park across town, where they would legally be allowed to do tricks and things like that.
In the park, but not on the street. They
Correct.
Can roll by them.
Right. So
And the park was built for that.
Yeah, but
Right.
the streets is,
But
okay.
so it's sort of like having a sports car. You're allowed to have a sports car that could go 120 miles an hour. However, you're not allowed to drive 120 miles an hour if the speed is posted at 25, right?
Gotcha.
So wearing a really cool, aggressive pair of skates doesn't mean you're allowed to use them in an aggressive manner.
Okay.
But in this case, you're not allowed to wear them at all. And there also have been situations where people have had run-ins with the police where they were not wearing aggressive skates, but roller blades and commuter blades and aggressive skates were considered to the untrained eye as the same, which just added, a police stop that could have been avoided otherwise. So this is what we have on the books now. And I propose to the council that we consider decriminalizing this behavior while still protecting property and requiring safe behavior. So that language, you'll see it passed the
2000.
June 27th, 2000. And Councilman Henderson had wondered about the history of that. There was a lot of trick skating and skateboarding that was very popular at that point, and we were having damage to buildings, public and private, in the downtown area, and so I think that was part of it. Though people who were around at this point say it wasn't the only thing. You know, I think there was sort of a culture that was part of that people found unbecoming to the downtown area. So we're 24 years almost past that, 23 and a half years past that. And I think the concern remains to make sure that we're very clear that you can't damage property and you can't harm people when you are using these modalities. So what I have brought before council is to strike the previous prohibition and instead change it to these 2 points: that no person shall operate these devices with observed disregard for the safety of persons or destruction of property. And then you can read the entire thing. And that the other is that you shall not operate them in a manner that is reasonably likely to damage or deface any public or private property, whether real or personal. So that's my suggestion. I would love to have your feedback on just this first goal of, is it a reasonable consideration to lift our ban on using these devices in this overlay?
Just from what we talked about in the previous meeting, we were talking about how many people got cited, and I think it was just 4. And of the 4 citations, I think one person got half of those. So there's not a lot of citations going on with this. And then, you know, what was happening that the same person got cited twice? What was the situation? But I think when I think about downtown and think about what I see downtown, is I'm down there regularly, you know, it's just not a lot going on. I don't see, you know, I spoke with the Downtown Alliance, you know, and things like that. They're not against it, but it does begin to, you know, ask the question, you know, does there need to be a change at this moment? Because it's not really just on the decriminalizing part. You know, there's been 4 citations in X amount of years, I don't know. And like I said, 2 was before the same person. So we're not sure about what actually caused all of that. And the other biggest concern is, you know, people being on the, you know, they can skate in the road at the end, you know. Right now they can't, but they can, even though it says, you know, observe, you know, they have to observe things and do the right thing, you know, do what's right. And we want to trust that people are going to do what's right, but we know everybody doesn't. And that could cause significant harm if somebody's out in the middle of the street skating because they like, well, the law says I can. And so I'm going to. And yeah, they get cited, but by the time you cite it, that's more reactive. Now, you know, some harm has been caused, something has happened, and now we can go back and say, well, we can cite them or whatever, but they could have got hit by a car. It could have been, you know, a number of things that could happen. You know, driver sees them swerve somewhere. You know, there are a lot of different circumstances we can do, but I think we have to really consider, do we want skateboarders or roller skates in the middle of the road? I think putting it on, you know, in the, what do you call it? Bike lanes. Like
And the skate park too.
Skate park, yeah. So there's a skate park, there's an active place that's getting redone, I believe. I think we got some capital dollars going into the skate park. So that is a space that's being redone that's for that. But, you know, having this, it seems like a lot to
So
do. I I mean, it just hasn't been a lot going on here.
So would you would want to see more people breaking the current law before we would consider
There haven't been,
changing it?
well, we have to look at what is happening.
Uh-huh.
Are people breaking the law?
It looks like no, people aren't breaking the law in any great number, but people have a desire to be able to use different means of transportation.
Right.
And a ban prohibits them from being able to do that.
Prohibits them from doing it where? Everywhere or downtown?
In this downtown
Right.
area. This is the only place in the city where it is illegal to be on this form of transportation.
Because downtown is the hub, and you have thousands of people coming downtown for different events and festivals. I see skateboarders. I see them down there. I don't call and report them. I don't think it's necessary to do that. But you have such an influx of people at times, you know, sometimes traffic's cut off. You have different events and things, and so people out skating and doing things like that, especially if it's an aggressive skater or somebody that decides, I don't care what y'all law say, I don't care what your city says, I'm gonna do what I want. There could be significant harm to somebody that's going fast, you know, for a child, hit a child, bump them, knock them down in the street, that's asphalt, you know, that can be some serious harm. So you look at all the different circumstances, and then we look at what actually has happened. There have been 4 citations in X amount of years. You know, I kind of wish we could have a little bit more detail about what those citations were for, but I don't, you know, as far as downtown is concerned, you know, we want to make sure that everybody's having a good time and everybody's safe. You know, we have bike lanes, people can ride their bikes. People want to have strollers, they can. I know one of the pictures had the family with the kids on the back. You know, that's a bike, you know, they ride the bike lane too. So there is space for that, but I don't think at this moment downtown is really ready to, I don't call it a ban, but remove that stipulation at this point.
So, question. One of the points that was brought up at our voting meeting, business meeting in December, was that I believe it was Councilman Smith who said he felt like rollerblading and skateboarding, which are 2 items that have been left out of the general pedestrian consideration, that they should be limited to areas where we have the infrastructure for that. And that's interesting when we think downtown is flat, it has wide sidewalks, and it has bike lanes, and it is a hub of employment. So it would seem that if we're looking for a place where we would expect more multimodal transportation, and where we have built out infrastructure to accommodate it, that downtown would in fact be the ideal place for that, versus some of the thoroughfares that were mentioned also in the meeting of Brainerd Road, Highway 58, and East Brainerd Road. What do you think about that?
I think those all fall into, when you think about Brainerd Road and all those things, you think about Broad Street, Market Street, Chestnut Street. But you want to think about those main thoroughfares for us. You know, you have people coming off the interstate, especially you get off at 4th Avenue or MLK. People are turning. It can be hectic sometimes. And what you don't want is people are moving and bustling, and then you have here a roller skater in front of you in the street. Because right now, with this, they can ride in that street, and we can say all these things we can say.
With what we have on the books now, or with the ideas brought forward?
With the idea.
Well, and let's get to that part next, like the
okay.
specifics of what we might allow, were we to, so the first goal would be, let's make this not illegal. Let's make it so you don't have the potential of a police officer pulling you over. And while it's not the way the law is written, police officers have said to one of these individuals, I will throw you in jail if I see you again. That's not the kind of escalation that we want.
It is not.
In our city, right, for something. And also, it's interesting that our colleagues have said things like, well, I think it was Councilman Smith who said in the meeting, I don't really want, could we just leave it but not prosecute it? Why have it if we aren't going to enforce it? if we are gonna say from a dais, we're not gonna enforce it because not enough people are breaking it, but then if they break it, we're not gonna enforce it. That just doesn't practically make sense to me. Councilman
But-
Henderson?
So here's my concern, and, you know, when you decriminalize it, I guess, so let me go to my concern, and I think infrastructure is the right word. You have infrastructure for vehicles, which is the roads, you have infrastructure for pedestrians, which is the sidewalk. We really don't have infrastructure for bicycles and rollerblades and skateboards. On the ski slopes, most of your collisions happen when a slow skier gets into a path of somebody that's coming at a faster clip. The person skiing slow is unaware that this other faster skier is coming up behind. The faster skier doesn't have an opportunity really to react. And so my concern is putting rollerblades or skateboards on the sidewalks is you now have two speeds of, you've got foot speed and now you've got rollerblade and or skateboard speed, which travels at a faster clip. The skateboards bother me a little bit more than the skates. Skateboard's not attached to your feet and can get away from you and can cause harm to somebody else just by the fact that now it's traveling free or whatever. At least the skates are attached to the feet and are not gonna do any damage by launching. But you're still, even with the skates, you're traveling at a faster rate of speed than somebody just walking down the sidewalk. And a kid gets loose from their mama and gets into the path of the skateboarder. I figured that the reason that we kind of outlawed skates and skateboards on the sidewalks downtown is because at this point in time, we were trying to attract tourism downtown, which is foot traffic. And you didn't wanna, I guess, run the risk of, the safety risk of people being run into by skates and or skateboards. I think we even increased the police presence downtown just to try to make it safer when we were trying to rebuild that downtown so that people felt safe walking downtown. I'm not sure how safe they would feel with people, and I'll use the term whizzing by them, and that may not be an accurate term, but people obviously traveling at a faster rate of speed than the people walking. I have a concern with bicycles being on the sidewalks for the same reason. But I kinda have the same concern with bicycles being out the road for the same reason, because the cars are going faster than bicycles, so we get back to the infrastructure. We need an infrastructure for bicycles and skateboards, just like we have an infrastructure for vehicles, we have an infrastructure for pedestrians. So I think if we can figure out how we create that infrastructure in a downtown arena, then I don't have a problem with them being there, but I do have a problem with them being on the sidewalks with the pedestrians that are walking. And obviously, you're not too concerned with somebody walking up behind you that's maybe walking at a little faster speed. You don't have that chance of collision, and I think what we're trying to avoid is that opportunity for collision when somebody's traveling with those inline skates at a faster clip than somebody just walking, particularly a kid, that.
How about we take a look then at, we'll come back to this and take a look at what our safety and behavior expectations would be for people when they're traveling on skates and skateboards, because it's possible that we could dial this in or do two things: stop making it illegal and give some very clear guidance for what's expected, because we know we don't want skates or skateboards in the middle of large roads for safety reasons, right? And we don't want pedestrians on sidewalks to be harmed by fast-moving skates and skateboarders, right? Like, would we say those are our two primary concerns that we wanna address?
I would think so.
I mean, yes, ma'am.
Okay, so question, who would be responsible, It just, you know, if it happened, if skateboarder runs into and hits, an elderly person or a child and harms them, who's gonna be responsible for those injuries?
I think there would be personal responsibility for that, would there not?
Depends on the lawyer following the law.
First person would be sued by the city.
Yes.
I was gonna
Which is
say,
gonna be the case no matter what.
Well, I mean, the
right?
aspect
I mean,
under
you
the,
trip over a lump in the sidewalk and you're on your own feet.
it
Yeah.
depends on the, I guess, the person that is filing the claim on that end of it here. And then the Tort Liability Act requires us to have potential liability for dangerous or defective conditions. And so that's generally the approach that someone takes in filing the action, asserting that our infrastructure is insignificant for that issue. So that's a concern we have. That was a concern, maybe it was before you were on the council, that we had an issue involving a person riding a Segway device.
okay,
And it was their very first time of being able to do it. She skipped the training session to learn how to ride a Segway and ran up on a lamppost when she first got on the device and fell off and broke a number of bones and sued the city. So we had that.
yeah.
Because she
that's-
had a lamppost.
Yes.
Yeah,
Phil, would you not say that the city would be liable in the fact
Well,
that we passed an ordinance
that's what
that
I'm thinking.
allowed the skateboards and the skates, and which led to,
That's why I think you gotta be careful in where you do allow and where you don't, and what areas are considered to be adequate on your infrastructure and where they're not.
yeah.
And remember also in this process that since this ordinance was drafted in 2000, we now have probably 10 more miles of Riverwalk that we did not have. And I don't think that there is any prohibition for the Riverwalk for people to be able to use skates on. So, I mean, that's another area you need to sort of think about a little bit in your process.
And, you know, the point about, did we have ample, what'd you say, ample or?
Infrastructure.
Ample infrastructure in place or what?
Yeah, but it was something about the maintenance of it, because
Dangerous or defective?
dangerous or defective, because, you know, something that, has come up is if the idea of bridging from, a bike lane to a crosswalk and so on to stay off of a sidewalk or to stay off of a road, which it's interesting because at the beginning of this, I was advised, we don't ever want anybody ever on a sidewalk. But then from the dais, we heard we don't ever want anybody ever on a street. So, and we have a large contingent of people that don't ever want to see another bike lane ever put in Chattanooga. So we're kind of in a funny place here. And yet we have people that are getting about our city in ways other than vehicles. But
You also
our
have those-
sidewalks
You
are,
also have those lanes downtown now that we've never had before that are sectioned off, which I
That's
think
true.
would be a perfect location.
yeah, but our sidewalks are not all well maintained enough to be a safe place to skate.
Right.
So something to consider as we think about that. But so with these two main concerns, Councilman Ledford, thank you for joining us. Just to get you up to speed, we looked at what the laws are in Tennessee for drivers related to pedestrians, and we looked at what the laws are for pedestrians. And so what the rights are of pedestrians, and confirmed that if you are a driver, you are supposed to be responsible for your vehicle, and you're not allowed to hit people, and you're not allowed to run over people in crosswalks, and you have to yield to pedestrians and things like that.
Which is why I keep hounding on information, education to the public, because, I mean, I'm out there, you're out there driving around, and I think people just forget that, you know, you have an obligation not to hit people, because,
And Chairwoman Dotley brought up, we started out talking about these two goals. One is that I am bringing to the council for consideration with this. My goals are to decriminalize rollerblading and skateboarding, which is specifically within an overlay that includes North Shore, downtown, and a lot of our river to ridge area. And then also to establish expectations for safety for and guidelines for safety when you are using these devices. So that's
Yeah.
you're caught up. So we were tabled, or not tabled officially, but we're moving back, we're moving away from the conversation about should we lift the ban, in order to consider what regulations for safety might we want to be certain to have in place to be willing to consider lifting the ban. So this is the original proposed language that I brought to you all, and none of it is sacred to me. I did notice that as Phil and I had worked on this together, that item B points out that persons using roller skates, etc., should be granted all the rights and shall be subject to all the duties applicable to pedestrians, which is when I went back and said, well, what's the role of a pedestrian? What are the things that they have to do? And so I went through that at the beginning.
So, real quick, so if they're considered pedestrians, and no matter where a pedestrian is, they always have the right of way, whether in a crosswalk or anywhere, this almost gives roller skaters the right to cross anywhere, if they're given the same rights as pedestrians, and that's something she went over earlier with so if it gives them the same rights, because I know when you brought it up, I thought, man, I remember that from like driving school or something. Pedestrians always have the right of way. It doesn't matter
Well,
where they
you'll
cross.
see in item B that the previous statement to that says when crossing a street on a crosswalk. So there is an
Delineation.
element there that says we're specifically focused on, we're giving them the rights of pedestrians when they're crossing a street on a crosswalk. So pedestrians with state law are allowed to cross just about anywhere, but we're saying if you've got wheels on your feet, you're allowed to not get hit
Okay.
in a crosswalk.
But because we are a municipality and that's the state law, if we were sued based on this, ultimately state law would win, and they would be, because they're at the end of the day pedestrians. So within our city, so like a city ordinance is saying, yes, you're a pedestrian, but you know these are the regular rules that we have as a city. But ultimately, the state law just says, well, that's good that y'all have that, and that is good that you have it. But if they took it up to a state court, at the end of the day, the state law is that what's gonna trump us out, you know, and say, hey, at the end of the day, they are pedestrians, and you reviewed this, you saw this,
Yeah.
and you know state law says they're pedestrians, regardless of what your law says.
Well, they're pedestrians, and they would be subject to the rules that state law has for pedestrians, and normally that's based upon comparative fault of the individual that might be involved in an accident. If someone is crossing at a location where someone can't see them, they're not wearing clothing that is bright enough for people to be able to see when they're going across, all those are going to be asserted by the party that might be in a vehicle that strikes that person or not. That issue would all be asserted on the basis of comparative fault on whether the pedestrian is crossing in an area that makes it difficult for the motorist to see them. So that would be looked at in that regard. And then also on the aspect of the city, y'all can adopt things that are more, I guess, strenuous or intense than what the state law has. By law, you are allowed to do that. But you also need to be mindful, if you're going to do that, of is your infrastructure in place of where you're saying that people should be able to do that appropriate? So if you're saying that they can do it on all streets outside of the downtown area, is that something that you want to do as well? Is that I guess, is that strong enough? I think it is wise to look at periodically how your roads are being developed and the infrastructure that is in place to say that it should be accepted in some areas, but maybe not in all. So that's what I was talking about on the front end of it. We actually have in the downtown area now that we didn't have in 2000, whenever this was first done up, we have street lanes that are developed that people could use potentially there that wouldn't be running over folks if they've got a big curb right next to them there that protects the people that are doing them. That's more available than just a bicycle use, because most of the time I don't see those areas being used. It's really frustrating that we've got that infrastructure in place. We likewise have a lot of areas for the Riverwalk that I don't necessarily see people using there as well. So, I mean, do we want to designate some areas that we think infrastructure is available or not? The state of Tennessee also has regulations that they've adopted that talk about where the use of skates and rollerblades should be done. And they can designate in certain areas by posting signs that it's appropriate in some areas and not in others. And maybe you might want to think about that as well when you're going through this.
Okay, thank you, Phil.
Yes.
I wonder if I think that your points are interesting and that we could really make some progress with that, Phil. But I also wonder, council, might we be interested in just fully striking item D? That was brought up by some bike safety experts as language that is made very clear to people on bicycles. And bicycles are legislated by Tennessee law, and they are considered actual vehicles, though they are also allowed by law to be on sidewalks. But this is a section that I've highlighted lightly that I think is causing some concern. I think it's worth noting that within this language, nothing ever says that a inline skate or skateboard can go down the middle of a road. It always says that you must yield to vehicles approaching from the rear. So the concerns that we have of rollerbladers being legally allowed to, go down the middle of Broad Street or East Brainerd Road or Highway 58 or Brainerd Road as the ones that were brought up, that's not the way this would be written. But we could even look at just removing D altogether.
So help me understand how that would help.
Well, I think that what I'm hearing is that council does not like any language that implies that you would be able to use a skate or a skateboard on a road and have use of the full lane. That's what I'm hearing. So it feels like D kind of adds a level of permissiveness. I don't think it fully does, but I'd be happy to, that could be a great cutting point. Yeah.
Let me ask this question. Is the root of this because you guys got pulled over?
You want me to talk about my story?
No, I heard your story.
You haven't heard my story fully.
Well, but you've been pulled over by the police.
I've been pulled over, he's been pulled over.
Okay, so and that's really what we're talking about, is the criminalization of using the roads for,
That is my primary
Okay.
concern, yes.
okay. I like where you were going with the decriminalization aspect of this, because we do have more people using the roads, but I'm still gonna stand on my education. And that is sharing this knowledge with everybody through PSA, through our media partners, that this is something we want people to pay attention to. Because I will tell you, I promise you, with what I do for a living, 7 out of 9 districts, I'm out there. People will cross the street, use the street, they don't care about crosswalks, they don't care about standing in the middle of the road at the middle of the night in dark clothing. They will be riding a bicycle and make an abrupt left turn in front of you, and they don't care. I mean, I just don't think we do enough in the public education realm about, 3 feet, share the road. I mean, I'm a cyclist. I get it. You're not gonna catch me on the roads in this city. Riding the river walks become a little bit dangerous. In certain parts, it's better. But up around certain areas, around the dam and below, and then north of Blue Goose is a little bit tricky. You better slow down. And so I think, we have the no texting, no hand, phones here. We have all that laws on the books. But people they don't do it. They don't do it. It's so easy. My 14-year-old's in the back every morning. And he's made it a mission of his to see how many people are watching movies, talking on the phone, going down the interstate, whatever. We just don't do enough. And if we want to get serious about educating and sharing the roads, I don't want these guys to get in trouble. If they're awesome on their skates, tear it up, man. We shouldn't be pulling them over. We've got high-powered scooters hitting the market here. I have a friend who has a business. 1,000-watt each wheel motors. these things are running 60 miles an hour. And we just need to, we need better education on how to utilize what we have.
We also
And
need to
share it.
modernize
Yeah.
our code, because the reality is that consumers are choosing
Other,
to use these
agreed.
modes of transportation. They're not going to stop choosing to use them because they have found that, you know, in building a community that you can live near your grocery store or live near your office, that this is a way to get around, and it saves money on gas and space and insurance and any number of things. So
I agree.
this would be a step toward modernizing without totally trying to reinvent the wheel. Just the ban would be a step toward modernization. You know, when I just no, we haven't had a lot of people be pulled over, but to me, the logical disconnect of if you've got one wheel, you're allowed to be there, and if you've got four wheels, you're not. If you're on if you're on a scooter, you can be there, but if you're on rollerblades, you can't. That is just a practical disconnect. And so, like some of the ideas you've brought up about safety on sidewalks and people moving around, I think, well, are we saying that we have a singular preference for people on foot and we don't want any type of multimodal other than foot traffic in our downtown?
I don't think that's what I'm saying.
Okay.
What I'm saying is, this poses additional danger in that when we pull everything away, according to TCA, based on what we saw earlier, these are pedestrians. And we can add all this on here, but at the end of the day, they are pedestrians. That means if a car strikes a pedestrian, and in the state of Tennessee, I know we talk about comparative fault, but in the state of Tennessee, pedestrians have the right of way. And if a car strikes them, 9 times out of 10, that car is at fault. Now, if somebody's out on skates or inline skates and decide, you know, I am because they are according to TCA, they want to get out in the middle of the road and skate away. Okay, and I've seen it down off of Broad Street. I've seen that at night sometimes. That, you know, there's a group that get out, they'll skate, and they're on the inline skates or the regular skates.
Old school skate.
I was gonna say on the regular skates, and they may have went to, you know, a bar or have done whatever, and now they're out in the street skating around, and here I am driving, and I'm saying this because this did happen.
Yeah.
I'm driving down the street, and they're just, you know, they living, like I said, live be great, but please get out the street, because they had but if I hit them, they're the pedestrian, even though they are the ones that's going to cause me to have an accident. They're the reason why I have to hurry up and swerve and get into, I was in the right lane because they were in the bike lane, but then, as County Councilman Leffert said, just dart out because they've been having a good time downtown, and I mean, I want you to by all means, have a good time downtown, but not in the space where now you're going to cause an incident, and the incident is going to be my fault, because at the end of the day, whether you're on skates, a skateboard, whatever, you are, according to Tennessee law, a pedestrian. And now I'm responsible for what just happened because you decided you wanted to do whatever you wanted to do, and now you darted out into the street. Even yesterday, same thing, riding down, going to work. It was a bike in the lane. I was like, oh Lord, the bike lane ended. So now I'm like, oh God, okay, let me slow down. But it was an underpass. So I'm like, oh God, am I gonna swerve over and hit the underpass, or am I going to, you know, we have to, those are things that drivers go through all the time. And the cyclist, you know, he's being careful too, but, you know, we're both kind of like, okay, who's going through the tunnel first?
Right.
You know, so when I think about this, I think for me, it boils down to the core of the definition of what they're doing. And the core of it is, at the end of the day, in TCA, they are pedestrians. And I've always been taught pedestrians have the right of way. Because when it's car versus man, the car's going to win every time. And if the car's going to win every time, I am going to be responsible. And if I'm responsible, I don't want to be responsible for ever hitting anybody. You know, I don't want to ever be, and I'm sure nobody does. But if, you know, I end up getting sued, or somebody ends up getting sued, and it goes down to the base law of Tennessee law, they are pedestrians. And if this is going to add to that, you know, add to there being an issue, then that's just something we can't do, you know, and then we have people coming in from out of town and things like that. It's just a lot to consider, but when you think about, at the end of the day, they are pedestrians, that is just, it compounds an issue that right now isn't really as big an issue. You know, I hate that there were citations given, and, you know, I don't know what happened, but I know it hasn't been that many. I know there's been 4. Nobody likes to get cited. I mean, I was watching Bureau Record Board the other day. Nobody likes to get cited.
Right, yeah.
But, you know, I don't know what was going on during that time. But what I do know, I've seen, because they wasn't aggressive on the skates, they were reckless on the skates.
No, they were skating.
Yeah,
They weren't reckless, they were skating.
Yes, well, I'm talking about the incident I was talking about. To me, it was
Oh,
recklessness.
that,
Yeah.
well, and interestingly,
Yeah.
four-wheel skates like that are not inline skates, they're legally allowed to do that, and this would give them greater responsibility by saying, you don't get to just be in the middle of the road. If a car's there, you have to get over.
Right. But if I hit them because they decided they don't care about our law, they are pedestrian.
Right.
And I think that's the basis for me, is that at the base of this, according to TCA, they are pedestrians. And I think that's that definition, you know, that kind of puts it in perspective for me. They are, because I love being a pedestrian, because I know pedestrians have the right of way. So I have a little ego thing about pridefulness about being a pedestrian.
Yeah.
Like, oh, you better stop because I'm in the street because I'm a pedestrian.
When I was pregnant, I was like, Ann, you can't kill this baby.
So, okay, now I'm a pedestrian. So they're saying, so we don't, you know.
Right.
So it's just that, you know, just something to really deeply consider when we look at, now we're layering all the things up and saying these different things, but when it boils down to it and gets down to it, it's just pedestrians. And I think that's what, for me, is the deciding factor for me. It's like, they're pedestrians.
So help me understand what the ramifications of that is for other forms of multimodal transportation that are also pedestrians, that are not banned in our code. How does that work?
I mean, we've already been sued by one.
Well, we're gonna be sued by anybody and
yeah.
everybody
It
for
feels like
anything,
sued,
right?
but-
Like, I
Yeah.
think we make, you know, this guy right here on the bottom left, do we need to limit his rights to be on that device? Do we need to limit the rights of the gentleman in the wheelchair on the far right? Do we need to limit the rights of the scooter? The bicycle is different because it's considered a vehicle. You're not allowed to hit that either, but
No, yeah.
and vehicles aren't allowed to hit them, right?
But are
we
they-
have this just disconnect in the practicalness of our rules right now.
Are they all considered pedestrians? I definitely know the wheelchair is.
They would all be considered pedestrians. Yes, I mean, well, bicycles are considered bicycles.
Right, because
And so they are they're handled under a different part of the Tennessee law.
right.
But
Would it be worth, I mean, I see both sides clear as day. And with the coming of more modes of transportation, you have the traditional road, it's still the traditional road, because we haven't changed that, and I don't think we'll ever have the money to change it to where it is adaptive to. So we're gonna have to figure out how we share the resources that we have. And that's for car drivers and scooters and skates and whoever. We're gonna have to figure this out. Do we know of a city, you know, I think of Wisconsin, Madison, Wisconsin comes to mind. I think they have a pretty good system up there where they know how to work together. But is it worth looking at some other cities' policies or areas where this works? I know that's a big college town, so I would expect that. But, you know, we got a fantastic college here, my alma mater. Figuring out how we could work together. And then maybe get some folks together in a room from different aspects, from CDOT to cyclists and people who are representing the scooter community, whatever, and throw out some ideas and then see if something sticks. Because I see where you're at, Madam Chair and Madam Vice Chair. I see it both. I love to ride my bike. I don't ride it on our city streets because I'm worried about people who drive. I'll be completely frank. I don't want to die.
Well, and you've said that a couple times, that you don't want to ever ride a bike in our city. And there are a lot of people that do want to ride a bike in our city. And
Yes.
you as a cyclist would like to, were you to feel safe.
Yes.
So it does bring up the question of what are the priorities of this council, and do we as a council have a desire to make our city safe for people in many different modes of transportation? So
Yes.
there's the safety conversation that's here about the larger infrastructure. There's the, are we going to continue to ban 2 specific forms of transportation in our community while not banning any others? And do we want to make our laws more clear than TCA on what we would expect from them? I do not get the impression that this council has any interest in moving forward with this. I mean, and Chairwoman Dotley, I fully respect your representation of your district. And I mean, it is the heart of downtown, and so certainly we aren't going to, I would not be so foolish as to try to hoist this upon you. I am disappointed, though, that it sounds as though there is not an appetite to make change in this regard right now. Am I reading those signals?
I think you're reading them right. And you said at this moment.
At this moment.
At this moment.
Yeah.
I think as we move forward, moving to that 10-minute walk city, moving into, the parks and outdoor play and things like that, I think continuing to incorporate this into the conversation is important, but I think at this moment, we're not ready to move forward. Well, I'm not, I can't speak for everybody.
Yeah, right.
Okay,
And-
right.
and you get, obviously, we each get one vote in a conversation like this, and I'll continue thinking about it. But it would not be my modus operandi to try to stomp on the will of a representative when this is an issue that's right in the heart of your district. Yes, dear?
One last comment. I would love for us to be at a point where these gentlemen and whoever else is lined up in any other mode of transportation, when they're out in public, have a clear expectations. And as a driver, as a motor vehicle operator, I have a clear expectation because I've been informed of what the plan is. And it seems to work in other places. I've been in big cities where it's phenomenal how it actually works. People they move around like a beehive or an ant farm. And it's fantastic because everyone seems to be at least on the same page. And do people push the envelope? Yeah, you're always going to have that. There's plenty of videos of inline skaters in New York City and doing, it's fun to watch. These people are amazing. But to get to that point where we can do this and do it right, I think everyone has to have the same expectations, or they at least should be notified. Or I think it's a big picture. It's a big undertaking because I don't want to be limited in my car. I loved it. When I lived in Jefferson Heights, I rode my bike, different time in history. I rode my bike to downtown all the time. And it was different then. It's grown tremendously since then, and I don't think I would do it now. But I think that, and then of course our phones, everyone's texting and worried about what's going on their phones. And I think if we could create a level of expectations and then spread it out, I think it feels like that's the goal. I think we can do it. I would love to see where we all kind of understand what's expected. But
that's a utopian idea.
It's big, I know.
That
I know, it's big.
Every person that has a driver's license would follow the law that they are supposed to follow, right?
Like
And
speed limits?
like speed limits, like
Wow.
the U-turn in the middle of North Market that I saw today.
Wouldn't that be nice?
The blinkers, not hitting people, not being aggressive, not driving drunk. You know, there's a lot of things that
Wouldn't that be
if we
nice?
could all just share the same ideals.
In a
we
perfect
could all
world.
Be perfect,
Yeah.
right? That is, you know, that's not gonna be our reality, and no PSA campaign will make everybody behave all the time.
I agree with you as well on that.
And we can't wait to modernize our laws until the world is perfect.
Right.
It just, we just wouldn't ever get very far, but, yes, Phil.
I was just gonna give you my observations, based upon looking a little bit here. Yes, we have a 20-year-old ordinance, that's first off. Most cities that are doing things in these areas try to regulate what areas they think it would be safer to look at on there. I was looking at the Nashville ordinance, and they don't allow them all over town there in Nashville as well. They have designated areas that they think the infrastructure is in place enough that will allow it to occur. And they had, you know, interesting rules in effect over there about skating single file, which I have not heard the discussion going on thus far, which might create less of a pedestrian or motorist type issue. And they also have the same type of things that we're talking about reckless or destructive operation. I think you do need to have something. I was making one small suggestion to your section on there that would include causes or may reasonably be expected to cause damage to city property. If it causes damage, then someone should not be able to just get away without having any responsibility for that, because that is a taxpayer expense that we have to deal with. And then the other aspect on here is there are restrictions on speed, restrictions on how close to the side of the road someone is going. If they're using a bike lane and a bike lane is available, they should be using those lanes. And then requirements for helmets, lamps, or other required equipment to make sure that those people are safe in doing that. And that's what I'm seeing in most of the regulations that are involving, you know, skating. So if we get to the point where you feel comfortable in that regard, I think those are the types of things that we could do that would help.
So, I wonder from council, would it be a good use of Phil's time to craft some language that does some of those things, regulating where, adding some safety equipment? Would that be something we would want to look at, or do we want our infrastructure to be significantly overhauled before we ever look at this issue?
I would think infrastructure is important, because they want, because we can look at safety features, but what's the place? Like I guess, where, who, when, how, type of thing.
Well, and the possibility of limiting, being more specific about where you would be able to use skates and skateboards, tightening that up. Would we want to look at that?
I mean, it's worth a look. I don't know how much of an appetite it is for at this moment, but it's always good to have information as we move forward with these other conversations about, you know, like I said, parks and outdoor, which I think this will play a big part in that. So I think it's important to at least have something to reference, if nothing else.
Okay, yeah, if you could work on that for us, Phil. We won't put this sucker to bed all the way just yet. Chairwoman Dotley, I really appreciate you giving us time on the schedule to be able to have this conversation. I appreciate y'all's candid, very, very fair and thoughtful feedback on all of it. I'll just keep nudging this little rock.
All right.
One day that little rock will make a little movement. Okay, thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank
Madam
you.
Vice Chair. It's good meeting.